Hi, my name is Laura Stewart, and this is my husband Carl.
Good day.
My story starts on the morning of June 26, 2007. I was working at Emerald Greens Golf and Country Club as the catering and special events director. I had left that morning to go to a nearby church to drum up some business, and I said my goodbyes to people at work and I left, and that's the last thing I remember.
I work part-time out of the house. So on that morning, I was returning from mailing something at the local pack mail. I was driving east on Fletcher Avenue and noticed there's a huge traffic jam. So I decided I'd avoid the traffic jam. I cut through the Lowe's parking lot and went home. When I arrived home, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, I just knew and felt something was wrong. I couldn't go back to work. I just felt something had happened in my life that I couldn't imagine. And so I called my wife's work phone, I called her cell phone, and I didn't receive an answer. And then I believe at that moment God spoke to me and said, go to the accident. I've never gone to an accident scene before, and so I went out, hopped in my car, drove out onto Orange Grove, and Orange Grove was backed up all the way to our house. So the voice in my head was so strong, I drove down the sidewalk. I drove down the sidewalk all the way to the scene, hopped out of the car, and saw it was my wife's car. I started running towards the car, and an EMT stopped me. And I said, I'm the husband of the lady in the blue car. And he said, well, sir, she's dead. And he announced then that the husband was here on the scene. Before that could really sink in, I heard my name being called by someone. And I turned and saw an old family friend. He was an EMT also, but that day was off duty and had been cutting grass next to the scene. He said that he was first on the scene. He then cleared her air passage and saved her life. He later received an award for that. But at that moment I realized that she was not dead, and he then realized that it was Laura that he had saved. So while I was standing there waiting and watching them cut her out of the car with the jaws of life, I called her mother and father, my mother and father, her four brothers and sisters, our 5 children. I told them that what had happened, they needed to start praying, and they needed to make plans to get to Tampa as soon as possible. I was then told that she was going to be life flighted to Tampa General Hospital. I should then drive down to Tampa General Hospital. Before I could get in the car, they told me instead it was St. Joseph's Hospital. So I drove to St. Joseph's Hospital. On the way, I made some phone calls. I called her work, and I called some friends. I don't remember how many friends because everything is sort of a blur. But when I got to the hospital, some of our friends were already there. They ushered me into a back room. In the back room, they had me sign a bunch of papers, and a doctor came in. The doctor said that she was seriously injured. Her chances of survival were about 2%, and that they were going to do all they could to save her. So we began praying, and more people showed up, and we prayed, and we prayed. And in those times in your life, you measure survival first in seconds, then in minutes, then it's hours, then it's days, and then it's weeks. But time seems to pass slowly, but you start measuring things differently. At that point, the family all came into town. Everyone got there, and we started a prayer chain. The prayer chain stretched all the way to Asia and into South America. And everyone prayed, and we prayed. And I believe that I've seen a miracle, that my wife was not supposed to survive, but through the power of prayer, that she did survive. And I believe that God also touched me when he told me to go to the scene so I could be there to see it.
My next memory is waking up to find out 3 months later, I woke up in what I called a Ziploc bed. They had me in this bed that had mesh up the sides and a zipper up at the top so that I couldn't climb out. My life had changed. I've changed. I'm still alive. However, part of me died that day. I lost a large part of me. The car crash, it just so happened a friend and a firefighter just so happened to be there mowing grass. He saved my life. It just so happens that Bay Flight was returning back to the hospital, was emptied, and had 2 nurses on board, one that was able to diagnose a torn aorta. It just so happened that Tampa General was full. They sent me to over to St. Joseph's. It just so happened that all the right doctors were there. The orthopedic for my hips, the compound fracture on my right leg, the general surgeon for my torn liver, my collapsed lung, holes in my bowel and my bladder, a neurologist for my severe head trauma. Everybody was there. The path of survival has been a physical one. Endless hours of therapy, personal training, doctor's appointments, and massages. I was very confused at that time and felt alone. The kids had all gone back to their lives. My parents had gone, and at that time we had lost our dog, my protector Charlie. I felt like there had to be more. There had to be more than what was there right now. So it just so happens we decided, because we decided to rescue an older dog. Her name at the time was Cupcake. We didn't like that, so we changed her name to Chloe, which she answers to now, who came to be my best friend. And it just so happened I met a woman who was part of Pause for Friendship. And it just so happened she happened to introduce me to Larry, who just so happened was the founder of Canines for Christ at our church at Van Dyke. We became involved. I felt a sense of belonging again, of hope, and several months of being a part of Canines for Christ, we asked Larry about Gracie and the breeder who he received her from. And it just so happened at that same day we called, she had a dog returned from someone that had bought her and returned her to the owner. The owners returned her to the breeder. And it just so happened at that time we were looking for another dog, and we told her our story, and she said, she's yours. If you want her, she's yours. So it just so happened about a month later, we got Leah. After that, we got Leah. We found out that her birth date, which it just so happened to be the same day as Gracie. They were litter mates. They were sisters. I don't believe in coincidences, but when you have so many just so happens, there is where you find God, hope, and love. And it just so happened my mother has always said, you have to find the good things in a bad situation. I try to do that every day. I try so hard. I'm thankful that it's me in that crash and not someone who didn't have an awesome amount of friends, family, and being involved in the community and a strong church. I'm thankful it wasn't them. I'm not thankful it was me, but I'm okay with that. I'm seeing a counselor, and I was encouraged to write a letter to John, the young man that hit me, knowing that I would never mail it to him. Never mail it to him. I did, however. A couple of years later, I found his Facebook page, and not having let go of my anger, I sent the letter onto his private message board, and at the end of it, I simply said, I forgive you. It was just so happened, it let go of my anger. To just forgive him was what God had always wanted me to do. It just so there's just too many just so happens. I don't believe in them. I believe God had a hand in all of this. I believe God has a path in our lives, and this was the path he chose for me. And I hope that the people that hear this story will think before they drink or do drugs or text and get behind the wheel, because they don't know who they're going to hurt, who they're going to kill, or who it's going to affect. So I'm just blessed to be here. I'm blessed to be part of Canines for Christ, which is which our dogs are part of. We go out weekly. We've changed both, and I'm very grateful and thankful for that. My husband started a referral service called SOD, Survivors of Drunk Drivers. It's for crash survivors, to find doctors, different therapy, rehabilitation services, all the things that were created. It's called Laura's List. People, places, and things that are out there to help you. I encourage each of you to go to SOD.org. The effects of being the victim of an impaired driver last you a lifetime. Recovery is a lifelong process that requests the assistance of many specialists, the organization, people, and God. God's the most important. Thank you.
One thing I think is important is when you hear her injuries, you'll imagine how it is that she's still here. She had a closed head trauma with bleeding on the brain. They thought she had a broken neck. She had a punctured lung. She had broken ribs. She had a sliced liver, perforated bladder and bowel. Both her hips were shattered front and back. She had a compound fracture of her leg and a broken ankle that they did not find for 6 weeks. She also had back surgery, and she had to have a fusion in her lower back. And the most serious injury she had was a dissected aorta. There are 3 levels of your aorta. 2 of hers were torn. If the third ruptured, she would have died instantly. So she was put in a coma, a drug-induced coma for 6 weeks until the bleeding in her brain stabilized and they could operate. And they put a stent in her thoracic aorta. It was leading-edge technology at that time. When we asked the doctor what was the life expectancy for someone with a thoracic aortic stent, he said each day she survives extends it 1 day. She is the person who's lived the longest with this. So, as she said, everything just fell into place properly. She spent 6 weeks in a coma, a week at the hospital having the surgery, and then 6 weeks at Tampa General Hospital rehab. And then every day since that, for the last 6 years, has been a day of rehab. But it's a day, I believe, that a miracle occurred.